medication is delivered to you in a fashion which actually the clinicians deal a patient of this disease in that way. So I will present to you a case. It's a 61 years old male who came with the complaint of abdominal pain for 5 days, and that pain, the upper abdominal pain actually, and it was associated with fever, malaise means fever and weakness, chest pain with little shortness of breath, a difficulty in breathing. Plus, he was also feeling lack of appetite. He, on further interrogation, he admitted that he is suffering from diverticulitis of the large intestine and is being treated. At the time of his arrival in the emergency, his physical examination revealed his heart rate, means the pulse, which was high around 120 beats per minute, although regular, and his blood pressure was 160 millimeter of mercury. So he was on a little bit of higher side of his pulse, and the right upper quadrant was tender, and there was guarding as well. His labs were sent at that point, which turned out to have high white cell count of 18,000 per cubic millimeter, and his hemoglobin was moderate, was on the lower side. It was 10 grams percent. Similarly, the other labs were there. Creatinine, total bilirubin, and alkaline phosphatase was on the higher side. Ultrasound was also done, which showed hypoechoic circumscribed lesion surrounded by an irregular thickened wall, and he is also having gallstones as well. So, what's next? Um, I'll discuss in the coming slides what we'll do next, and you make up your mind here at this point. Okay, what should we do next in your own mind? You just make a sort of a plan, and we'll discuss it in the coming slides. Here is the CT scan, which was contrast enhanced, and you can notice here in the left lobe of the liver there is a hypodense. Hypodense means the density of the liver, and this lesion is on the darker side, which means it is less dense, and it is about 5 and 6, between 5 and 6 centimeters, and occupies second and third segment. Here you can see this is here on the left side, and you will also notice that it is well circumscribed. It is not actually infiltrating into the further into the liver tissue. So the diagnosis here is, let's discuss what type of liver abscesses are there. Usually pyogenic, then parasitic, and some others which are very rare, the candida. Mostly these are the figures of western countries. Pyogenic 80%, and amoebic liver abscess 10%. But over here in our region, Pakistan, India, and the surrounding regions, uh, the overwhelming majority of liver abscesses comes with the etiology of amoebic liver, Entamoeba histolytica. This is the main cause of liver abscesses in our region, and pyogenic liver abscesses are less. So mostly 70% are from are amoebic liver abscesses, and 25% pyogenic liver abscesses, and fungal and other causes are much less than 5%. So again, incidence in the United States is around up to 15% per 100,000. Over here, it is much higher. I don't have figures at hand at the moment, but it is much higher than 15% per 15 per 100,000. Male and female ratio is same 4 is to 2 is to 1, and mostly in Western countries it usually occurs between fifth and seventh decades of life. Over here, it is a bit less. You can start from the fourth decade of life up to 70. Risk factors are the same here as well as in the Western countries: diabetes mellitus, underlying hepatobiliary or pancreatic malignancies, or when there is a history of liver transplant. All these are factors, and the common thing in all these is either the patient is immunocompromised for diabetes or liver transplant medication, or patient has underlying obstruction into the hepatobiliary on the pancreatic region, and that leads to sepsis. Now again, biliary disease accounts for 20 to 40%. Extrahepatic obstruction leading to ascending cholangitis and abscess formation, like stone in the common bile duct, or pancreatic or periampullary malignancy obstructing the common bile duct, is leading to sepsis and abscess formation. This is for the pyogenic liver abscess. Entamoeba histolytica creates its own liver abscess, and it is common here in our part of the region, where the infection in the intestine then goes through the portal system to the liver and settles there, and creates cytotoxic substances and by the Entamoeba histolytica, and that creates an abscess, and then it is also superimposed by second infection by the pyogenic bacteria. So hepatic amoebic liver abscess also is almost always secondarily infected with pyogenic bacteria, with the gram-negative bacteria. Again, same. We can also get infection from the portal system, as I've already discussed in the previous slide, and infection process originates in the abdomen, reaches liver by embolization through the portal system. Appendicitis, diverticulitis, proctitis, all these infections in the intestines leads to goes to the liver via portal system when the when the immunity of that individual is low. Again, hepatogenous infection also comes to the liver via hepatic artery. If there is a widespread sepsis in the body, the arteries which supplies the liver can lead to infection spreading into the liver substance. For example, endocarditis and pyelonephritis. Direct extension via penetrating injuries like gunshots, they can also lead to infection in the liver, which is eventually becomes an abscess. And in some cases, maybe up to 20%, you don't find any cause. But usually, the cause we don't find it, but usually they are from the above causes which I have already explained. Here is a table where it shows the sources, which is already explained, the biliary tract, the portal system. Cryptogenic means we can't find it, maybe these two, but we can't actually are sure where it's coming from. Hematogenous seedling, direct extension through penetrating trauma itself, or sometimes here secondary infected. For example, a hydrated cyst is present in the liver for long time, and it gets infected get infected, and that leads to a liver abscess, and also if some sort of surgery has been done in the on the liver, and that leads to necrosis and infection and necrosis, and subsequently abscess formation in the liver. If we talk about biogenic bacterial infection, mostly they are more than one organism, mixed infection. Blood culture positive also in about one third to half the cases. E. coli, the gram negative, most common gram negative bacteria in the intestine is usually the cause. Klebsiella is also implicated. Sometimes both are present, as well as the the anaerobes of the intestine, and streptococcal, again an anaerobe, and usually aerobe but anaerobic streptococci or staphylococcus, they are also present along with E. coli. So mixed infection is usually the cause. Again is repeating the same table. You can see E. coli is the topmost in gram negative, and similarly there are gram positives, anaerobic organisms, and the fungi. They all could be the cause, either as a single organism, but usually the infection contains multiple organisms. How do they present? A patient with an abscess in the liver is presents mostly almost 100% of times with the fever, and then about 50 to 75% of times with upper abdominal pain. Usually, when you examine them, they usually have hepatomegaly. You can palpate the liver below the right costal margin. They may or may not have jaundice. It is not a 100% sign of jaundice, but I think 50 to 60% of patients do come with the jaundice. Less common symptoms are the right shoulder pain, the pleuritic chest pain because of the sympathetic development of pleuritis on the right side, as the liver is in close proximity to the diaphragm, and diaphragm is in contact with the pleura, so pleuritis also takes place. Patient does not have good appetite, and therefore he also suffers from weight loss. And when the infection goes into the when the abscess leads to septicemia, the patient may get mentally confused. Investigations are also sent in such patients, and anemia or low hemoglobin is very common, and in high white cell count usually is almost always there. Liver function tests are elevated, serum bilirubin is elevated, and serum albumin is on the lower side because of the malnutrition, anorexia, sepsis, and inability of liver, less ability of liver to make albumin. So albumin is one of the commoner findings where albumin is low and bilirubin is high on the liver functions. CT scan and ultrasounds are very good modalities. An abscess appears radiologically as a fluid collection, which I've already told you. They present as a hypoechoic area in the liver. The wall is usually well circumscribed, and you can also see edema around the wall of the abscess cavity. So they show like that. I'll show you in the coming slide. Here it is. It's a section of a CT scan, and you can see a well circumscribed wall and hypoechoic collection of fluid and surrounding normal liver parenchyma. The density of the liver parenchyma is different. This is hyperechoic as compared to this blackish low hypoechoic abscess cavity, and this is a wall, and there is a rim of edema here. You can see all along the abscess wall is edema. So this is how it appears on a section of CT scan. Similarly, you can also see a fluid level as air fluid level here. So this is again another example how the liver abscess appears on CT scan. Ultrasound scan, you can see ultrasound scan is also a good modality, and it is cheaper and more readily available than CT scan. So ultrasound scan is also a very good first line imaging modality you can use. It is non-invasive, no radiation, it is inexpensive, and its diagnostic yield is very acceptable. Almost diagnostic yield, diagnostic sensitivity is as good as CT scan. Now here comes the question, how do we treat such patients? So let's discuss how we treat such patients. First of all, antibiotic therapy. As we know, when the investigation suggests that it is an abscess, a liver abscess, we have to start with appropriate antibiotics, and side by side we have to arrange for the aspiration and drainage of an abscess. As the principle of surgery suggests, wherever there is an abscess, it is almost a universal thing to drain the fluid. Whether it is a surgical drainage or in case or catheter, radiologically guided catheter drainage, that is a question that has to be discussed, but we have to take out that infected fluid from the abscess cavity. If the abscess is sufficiently large enough, we have to take it out. Antibiotic therapy is you have to empirically guess what type of antibiotic to be used in such abscesses. As we have an idea what type of organisms are involved, you can see they are gram positive, gram negative, and anaerobics, a mixed infection. So you have to give a broad spectrum antibiotic like third generation cephalosporin, which plus metronidazole as well to counteract the anaerobes. Fluoroquinolones and metronidazole is another option, and monotherapy with carbapenem or extended spectrum penicillin is a third option. You can see that immunocompromised patients, when they get this problem, a liver abscess, a pyogenic liver abscess, they tend to have more than one or multiple abscesses all along the liver parenchyma, and this shows a grave prognosis, because not only the abscess is not confined to just one place, it has spread to all over the liver, and that gives a patient a bad prognosis. So in these cases, a higher dose of antibiotics and other measures like nutritional upbuild and supportive treatments are also instituted. Now the important aspect: how do we drain a fluid, a pus from that space, liver abscess? For single abscess with the smaller diameters, like 5 centimeter is the cutoff. Less than 5, yani 2 inch, less than 5 centimeter. Usually, they are supposed to be having a better prognosis, and percutaneous drainage or needle aspiration is more acceptable. Rather, in many cases, we don't even drain it. Lesser abscesses like 1 inch or 2.5 to 3 centimeter abscesses, we leave it, and we just build the patient's immunity and start antibiotics. So less small abscesses, very small abscesses, are resolved on their own. If they are more than 5 centimeter, percutaneous drainage is the method of choice. Some favor surgical interventions, or when the patient has been opened for other reasons, or the abscess has been ruptured into the peritoneal cavity. In such cases, obviously, the open surgical method is there, but usually the abscess, which is larger than 5 centimeter, it is localized to one single abscess. Then percutaneous, and it is not multilocular. This is again one thing where percutaneous catheter drainage is failed because of the either it has got multiple septi, or it is very thick. Then in such cases, again, you have to do some sort of surgical procedure. Usually the success of catheter drainage is 70 to 90%. Here you can see this is a catheter going into the abscess cavity, two views here and here, and you can see usually this catheter has a curled tip so that they retain inside the abscess cavity. Had there been a straight catheter, the chances of coming out and dislodge are much more. So usually they have a curly tail. Guide wire is passed before passing it, so they get straight, and when it is placed in that in the abscess cavity, the guide wire is removed, and the natural curl of the tip comes into place, and then it tend to retain inside the cavity. As with any other procedure, the percutaneous drainage also has potential complications, although much less, but potentially we have to be mindful of the complication we may come across. First of all, the greatest fear is that while placing the catheter in the liver, in the abscess cavity, you may inadvertently damage the adjoining organs. If you enter into the thoracic space, patient can develop pneumothorax. Bleeding is one again a problem, as patient is already in a compromised physical health. He has got issues, so bleeding can occur, and leakage of pus into the abdominal cavity, producing localized or generalized peritonitis. This is also one of the complications, although rare, but potential is always there. So, as in contrast to catheter placement, which is a minimal invasive thing, we when it fails, we have to eventually come to surgical treatment. When, of course, because of various reasons, the catheter drainage is not successful, we have to resort to surgical therapy. As we have discussed, what are the indications, like coexisting intra-abdominal disease has required operative treatment, which I have already mentioned. When we cannot place a percutaneous catheter, and there are multiple abscesses are thick, ascites is there, so in such cases, obviously the last resort is a surgical treatment. Various routes: transthoracic, extraperitoneal, transperitoneal. Usually we prefer transperitoneal, as intra-abdominal pathology can be dealt with. We have both options, laparoscopy as well as open, depending upon how well you are, how good you have the backup system. You can resort to laparoscopy, and open is always the classical method by laparotomy. Here you can see a laparoscopic view, and you can see a wall of the abscess cavity has just been removed, and uh, a pus you can see here in this removed wall, through a window of that removed wall. You can see a pussy substance in the peritoneal, in the abscess wall, in the liver abscess wall. So this is how you view a patient by a laparoscopy, by a laparoscope. How long we have to treat such patients? It really depends on the on many factors. How well the patient recovers, how quickly the abscess is drained, and there is no refilling. And we can monitor such patients in the wards with the white cell count, a regular white cell count, regular C-reactive protein levels, which shows us how well the inflammation is being subsiding. We have to put, obviously the catheter should remain in place for a longer time, and see how the drainage is diminishing, and patient should be treated depending on average 2 to 4 weeks, and we have to see, how well the patient is recovering, patient's fever, patient white cell, how it is decreasing, and patient's weight is gaining, well-being of patient feeling good. So all these parameters, his as obviously serum albumin, all these parameters shows you how long you have to treat the patient. Obviously, complications of the procedure: rupture abscess to adjacent organs and cavities, they can enter. Pleuropulmonary complications like effusion, we have already discussed that. Empyema, obviously, if pleuritis takes place and eventually infection sets in the pleural fluid, the empyema sets in. Bronchohepatic, bronchohepatic fistula is something very rarely it happens when the communication between the ruptured liver abscess to the pleural cavity and eventually in the bronchus takes place. It's rare, very rare, but a potential is there. Intra-abdominal complication include subphrenic abscesses, common, yes. Rupture into the peritoneal cavity leading to peritonitis, obviously it is a potential complication, or rupture into the any intra-abdominal organ is also a potential complication that can occur, although rarely, but can occur. Prognosis, it again, I can't say this 10 to 20%. It really depends on patient's physical state, patient's comorbids, and how great the infection or the abscess is, how many. It really depends on the patient's initial state of health. If untreated, it is bad, obviously bad. I obviously have told you underlying comorbidities really shows you how good or bad the prognosis will be. The advanced age, more than 70 years, if there are multiple, if the infection is polymicrobial and that is resistant to the antibiotics, if patient is immunocompromised or is having a malignancy as well. So all these factors, as you can see, they lead to bad prognosis. Thank you very much.